Welcome to another episode of the Power Law Investor. Today is November 12th, 2024, a Tuesday, and we're going to be talking about Kaspa, the recent price action that we've seen, the downs with KRC20 that has taken place, or the lowering of prices, and sort of the jump that we've also had, and presenting a revised power law. And I wanted to get this out to you guys to sort of explain how I'm understanding what's happening in the Kaspa price action. And if you have comments, please put them in the comments below and thoughts, and we can discuss. As always, this is not financial advice. This is only for informational purposes. So right now, Bitcoin is trading almost at $90,000, and Kaspa is trading at just over 14 cents. Today, we'll be talking only about Kaspa. And I want you guys to sort of understand where I'm coming from and understanding how things are laid out for me and how I am sort of examining the situation with the price action and how we can put that into perspective. So in order to do that, we're going to take a step into some of the technical elements of Kaspa. And I've made a little chart out here that sort of explains how this sort of works, right? So let's zoom in. Before KRC20, we had Kaspa miners that would receive block rewards for solving these mathematical puzzles. And they also received within each block the transaction fees that were taking place. Okay. And we assume that some of these miners were selling the Kaspa that they were receiving in order to pay their bills. So you have these block rewards and you have transaction fees. Transaction fees are very small. Most of the Kaspa that they were getting was through block rewards. And through just some of you may know that Kaspa produces roughly about 1 block per second, and the block reward now is about 79 Kaspa. That means every 1 second, some miner receives 79 Kaspa. And the amount of transaction fees that we were actually receiving was actually pretty small. Okay. However, and these guys, these miners were selling. Some of them they're paying for electricity, they're paying for their equipment. Some of them may sell how much Kaspa they hold. And I mean, some of them might sell a lot, some of them might keep some based on what their expectation for price appreciation is. At the same time, demand is increasing, right? So we step by over here, you have Kaspa buyers that are looking to buy because of price appreciation, and they're spending some of their Kaspa through network usage fees. So every time someone sends Kaspa to someone else or to another address, there's a small transaction fee that takes place, and that can be large or small depending on how congested the network is, but generally it's pretty small. And the interplay of this, the decreasing block rewards, because over time the block rewards go down over here, and that increasing demand, the interplay of that produces the power law, right? And here's that power law that we've seen so many times. It's simply a straight line in the log-log plane. So this interaction between buyers and sellers, with the amount of Kaspa being mined decreasing, but the amount of demand growing up, results in producing this upward sloping curve for the price appreciation, right? And that's what we've seen in so much of this time before. So then how do we try and understand what has happened recently? And this was something that puzzled me too. From about September, middle of September, really, we saw a big decrease down from the power law trend line. And previously we had looked at this and sort of said, like, you know what, it generally bounces off the 40% trend line, but it didn't do that. It went through it, and it also went through the 50% trend line, minus 50% trend line, to way below. And for me, very much like you guys, I'm sure out there, I was thinking, has something significantly changed? And I couldn't find anything that has significantly changed outside the introduction of KRC20. Now, what is KRC20? KRC20 means that you are basically able to trade meme coins on the Kaspa network, as far as I understand. You can create different sorts of transactions. And what that does, instead of just moving Kaspa from one address to another address, you're also moving these meme coins. And if the number of meme coins transaction goes up quite high, the transaction fees also go up quite high, which is what happens over here, right? These transaction fees that the buyers were paying in order to move things around now go all the way to the transaction fees that the miners are making. So because there's so many more transactions happening, the miners get more transaction fees. And I thought the number of transaction fees was going to be, or the amount that was going in transaction fees was relatively minor, but that's not the case. Actually, if you look at it, we have about 7 million Kaspa that is being produced in terms of block rewards every day currently. But if you look at this, and this is from Kaspalytics, you can see that just to explain the graph, the black line is price and it's reflected on this axis, and the transaction fees are on the blue line and they're reflected in the left axis over here. So you can see before September 15th, before KRC20 went live, these things were almost zero, negligible. It was maybe a few thousand Kaspa. But once KRC20 started and people start trading meme coins, getting very excited about it, the transaction fees started to spike. So they went up big time to 20 million plus just on the first day. Now, typically here I've added these mining rewards are in the 7 million range. You can see over here, and it decreases down every month. That's what I've tried to illustrate over here. So what was happening is that the amount that the miners are getting through transaction fees just has shot up tremendously. Okay. And that can be at times 2 or 3 or 4 times what we're getting in through mining rewards. So that means that if you have a daily demand, that is matching with the amount of mining rewards, all of a sudden we've jacked up the supplies. And these miners, what if they decide not to keep them? Some of them may be keeping some of them and some of them may be selling them. But if they see the price going down, they're suddenly getting a lot more Kaspa. They start dumping that into the market, right? And so what would be the impact of these fees? Well, I did a sort of analysis for you guys. If we assume that the base level of Kaspa was around 15 cents before all this craziness sort of happened. So if we stay around here, we were roughly around 15 cents or so in this area. Then as the price went down, the amount of demand that was there for Kaspa was also increasing. So the lower the price went, there were more people buying, but it wasn't enough to deal with the amount of selling pressure that was coming through with these guys. Okay. So the transaction fees with KRC20 was creating so much more supply that and pushing down the price, that even with the increased demand, and here's a representation of what I expected, what the demand change was based on some calculations that I've done, that even when the price was going down, the demand was not enough to compensate. And so what is the actual impact, or what is the steady state? At the end of this, you guys want to find out hey, what does this mean? And the important thing is to realize that these prices or these transactions and transaction fees are quite spiky, but they are showing a decrease over time. So whenever there's a spike, there was a spike here, the price started to drop down. There was a spike here, the price started to drop down. Now, there could be other things that were also going on in the general crypto market, but overall, that's kind of what we're looking at. We're seeing an increased supply through transaction fees for KRC20 memes coming through, and that's pushing the amount of supply up, which pushes the price down because demand isn't enough there to suck it up. And the price kept on falling until demand was sufficient in order to absorb it, and that was at about 10 cents or so. That's when the party stopped. All right. So at that point, we had a daily demand of Kaspa of about 10.5 million, which is, I'll show you some interesting math here, which sort of matches in a number of different ways, right? And so here's your typical log plot in showing the power law. Here is what we expected. And here we can see that we're already in a little bit of a downdraft, but nothing major. But after September 15th, you really started to see a big change go down. And only recently has it popped back up, right? And so, sorry, it's not for Bitcoin. So a 50% increase in the supply, and I estimated that by looking at what the average amount of transaction fees were over this period, right? So I can't, because it's spiky, we can't look at it on a day-to-day basis, but when we average it across, we sort of get an idea. And it seems that the average supply has gone up by about 20 to 30, for about maybe 30 to 50%, right? And so this says demand change over here, but we're looking at sort of this range over here, right? So if all else was the same, just because of the increase in supply, we would expect the price level to drop down to about 10 or 11 cents. If the expected supply goes up by 50%, the demand to match that also has to increase by 50%. And that means we're looking at a price of about 10 cents. Or we're looking at a price of about 10 cents, and the price change has gone down by about a third. And so what I've been working on is creating a revised power law that'll allow us to see, given that we've had a supply change dynamics, what is a good price for us to continue buying? Because that's what you guys are mostly interested in, right? We're interested in finding when is it a good price and when is it not a good price. And so based on that, here is this power law situation over here, right? The red line is your typical power law, which I modeled to kick in on September 15th. And then the supply increase went up by 50%. Let's just call that roughly, will result in a price shift of about 33% below, which means our trend lines that we had below go down by about 50%, right? This is not, with Bitcoin, we had a similar situation with ordinals, but they never accounted for very much, and there's a lot more demand for Bitcoin, even as the price goes down a bit, so it really didn't impact things too dramatically. But here, it was a major amount, right? So if we've increased the supply by 50%, it's going to push the price down. And that's what I think has happened. It took me some time to try and understand it and do some rough calculations to figure out what the deal was. So what that means is that our price on September 15th, according to the power law, would have been around 23 cents. But then we had a little drop down. We almost went down to half that price over there with the power line. There's still some of the mathematics over here that we can go through at some time point. But basically, the idea is over here that we've had that these trend lines have been downshifted. Okay, and because these trend lines have been downshifted, we can now make an estimate. This is again a work in progress. I want to caveat, right? Is what are good buying opportunity points for us? Now, with the power law investor, we DCA in a regular amount no matter what. But A, is the power law broken? No, we've had a temporary. Maybe it's a permanent supply shock. Maybe these meme coins become a big part of the Kaspa ecosystem. Who knows? But if you're using the math that we have over here, we would end up with the minus 50% line. Today is November 12th, so looking at about just under 10 cents. The 40% line is probably, let's zoom in a little bit more. The 40% line is around 11.5 cents, 11.75 of a cent, and the 30% line is 13.7 cents, right? So long story short, even though that, this is just a rough draft, but I wanted to get this out to you guys so you'd be able to see what's happening, is at the current levels of Kaspa, we still didn't really end up breaking below that minus 50% trend line significantly, right? I mean, this was downshifted by 50%, and here we are. So the important thing to understand for those of us who are long-term Kaspa holders, or even those that are short-term, is this is just a drop, maybe a 50% drop, maybe a 20% drop, but then after that, the regular power law growth should continue. And so now's not the time to be dumping your Kaspa holdings if you think, oh, the system has gone haywire, it's broken. In fact, longer term, this is probably going to be a more positive thing. And the reason why that is because these meme coins attract more people into the network. And the network value is a function of, how many nodes it connects to, how many different people are, but also the amount of value that is being transacted through the system, right? So if we take a slightly long-term perspective, yes, the supply has gone up, but more people are now using it. And even if it's the same number of people, they're transacting more value through the network, and that'll eventually push the value of the network much higher. So for our portfolio, we continue buying in and we are opportunistic as to what happens. But at least based on this very preliminary analysis, I would suggest that it is quite possible that we might have values that drop down into the, below 12 cents. And that would be good opportunities to increase your exposure to Kaspa. So please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. And if you like the comment, like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you in the next one.